Hi, welcome back to the Entangled Health Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Madison Murphy Barney, and we're continuing today in our series of teachings from other species. And also wanted to share that we have a couple of openings right now in um, our like office hours. And so how those works is for 3, 6, or 12 months, you can sign up for support and we meet twice a month. And so as you're doing storytelling work and strategy work and community engagement and community mapping and all of those other things that fall under story-driven strategy, you can join our calls, and we're a really small group, and it's just great to have the support. And I answer questions and give insight and feedback on whatever you're working on to support you. And so if you would like to sign up for that, feel free to reach out. The link to learn more and sign up is also on my website, which is linked below. And yeah, it'd be great to have you in there. It's just such an interesting group with such great dynamics, and we all learn so much in it. It's like I'm there to answer the questions, but so often what we learn is that, other organizations are doing something that you can learn from, and it's just such a great place to get individual feedback and then also hear what others are doing and learn and adapt based on that. So highly recommend, would love to have you in there. And I also have for April, I have one space left for Story Lab sessions. So if you would like to get in and get on the calendar, let me know and we can get that booked. Okay, on to our episode. Last week, or last episode, if you chimed in, we were talking about bees, and this episode, we're going to be talking about orb weaver spiders. And so, bees circulate and pollinate and all that important stuff. But when they are doing all that, if they don't have infrastructure, they really need that to make their jobs worthwhile. And we all do too, right? And so, something that orb weavers can really teach us about is infrastructure and the importance of infrastructure and what it really means to build the web in the community work that we're doing. So, my people, I am Indigenous. If you didn't know, I am Shoshone from Wind River, Shoshone, and Hoopa. And so many of our stories talk about spiders, and we call spiders and orb weavers grandmother spider. And so, yeah, and so they have a really revered space in our ways of knowing. And so we call them grandmother spider. And so um, I know for a lot of people, spiders are sort of the no species, right? They like, you don't want them in your room. You don't want them in your basement. You don't really like, a lot of people just kind of get a full body feeling when they think about or encounter spiders. So when we talk about orb weavers, um, they are web making spiders, right? They weave their webs, and I hope that what you learn about them today, if you're someone who sort of um, gets a little bit squirmy at the idea of spiders, that you can learn that they play such an incredible role in the ecosystems that they serve, and how we can learn so much from them in the work we're doing within community, especially as health and justice organizations. So, to start off, orb weavers, they construct these spiral wheeled shaped webs that are really engineering marvels, right? They're built from a combination of sticky and non-sticky silk that is strategically designed. It's really light, right? It comes from their bodies, but can hold them and can hold others, and it sticks to each other. I mean, it's really incredible feats, and what they build is so beautiful. And I don't know about where you live, but often, if I'm on like a hike or a walk early in the morning in spring or fall, when it's really dewy, you can see the dew on the webs. And just to think of something that's so thin but so strong that it can carry much more than its weight in dew, and still it's so beautiful to see them like all covered in dew in the morning. I love it. And so their webs start with a framework of these non-sticky silk that constructs sort of the far off but key anchor points. And then a final spiral of sticky silk that does the catching and the connecting. So first they start with structure and then they add the active layer. And this is often how I think about strategy work, like, right? Like we need to put our core pillars down and listen to our community and do that like deep work and then build the strategy from there. And you can't build the strategy unless you have that deep listening to anchor you and that knowledge of what your colleagues and what your team and what your community needs and wants and sees working and all of that. And so, we can't start with a sticky silk, right? We can't start with the strategy and then try to implement it. We need to start with that anchoring point, those grounded parts, and then from there weave in the strategy that's built off of that wisdom and that knowledge. And one thing that's interesting is that um, they often dismantle and rebuild their web super regularly, like some daily. So this really can teach us, right, that maintenance is not failure, it's part of the work. And so if we can, try things, and if they don't work, it gets back to what we were talking about in the episode of bees, right? It's that iteration, it's that trying, and we learn so much in every iteration, and we want to, not be building things. We want to build things that last, certainly, but we want to learn in a way of making sure that we have something that's agile, that can be rebuilt and stronger and replaced when needed, and that it's not going to, sort of run out of resources. And in doing this, they consume parts of their old web to recycle the proteins and conserve energy for the next thing. So nothing is wasted. And this gets back to that, right? That iteration point of how do we make sure that like when we need to rework a program or rework our operations or rework how we're introducing storytelling, that we're doing all of that in a way that, where we're composting it in a way and using the energy of what we did last time to build on and make it stronger. And so we're not wasting resources or energy, but seeing it again as that iteration and that necessary maintenance and that necessary, sort of aliveness of the living and breathing programs that we create in the work we do. And one thing that I think is really interesting and key about orb weaver spiders is that they're passive hunters, so they don't chase. They build systems and let them do the work. And so they sit at the center or the periphery and sense the vibrations. And I think this can be such an important and grounding teaching is that, we want to, of course, like we talked about in the bees, go out and do the listening communities and things like that. But we also want to be that stable, central, we don't want to be scattered. We don't want to be always out and about and out of our core offerings, right? Our core what we services to the community. We want to really stay there and trust the rest of the ecosystem to come into the web and to to be attracted towards us through what we've built. And so I think that's just a really key part is thinking about these webs that we weave and how we can make them, sticky, not in a hunting sense, definitely not that, but so that others, when they come, they can also, that they are attracted to the web and that we've built something that's strong, that can hold, that can serve us, can serve our community, can serve our, everybody around. And so how do we build something? How do we build strategy? How do we build structures? How do we build programs that really do this holding and this attraction so that we can stay focused where we are and not get distracted by like, oh, should we be over there? Oh, should we be over there? Oh, should we be doing that? It's like, what are our zones of genius? What is our promise to the community? What do we need to be doing? And how do we build then that really anchored, stable strategy so that we're not, over focused on what's not happening, but are focused on making what needs to happen that only we can do happen. And something that I really love about orb weavers, about grandmother spider, is that their presence indicates a healthy ecosystem with abundant life. So they are an indicator species, and I think that's really key when we think about, like what would it mean if, our communities, when they're looking um, at the services available to them and their community mapping and things, that they think like our presence is an indication that their ecosystem is healthier, that we have improved the lives of the communities we're around, that we indicate wellness and functioning and flow. And how do we build systems that make sure that we are signaling to the communities that we serve that we are part of that healthy ecosystem and that indicate that trust? And as we talked about in the bee episode too, it's that sense of how trust can is built through the process of listening itself, and how we are in service in process, and the processes we build are themselves giving to the community and nourishing the community and supporting the community. And so this is another side of that too, right? Of that, like, us being here indicates that things are going well and that we have that trust and we have that We've shown over and over again that we are, when we are here, things are improved, things are better, we are of service. And just to think about some of these teachings, to go a little further in. So we talked about this a little bit earlier too, is that, we start with the anchor points first, right? We start with the structural threads that connect the key points in the landscape. And in our work, those are the relationships, the trust, that deep listening. And, and that's the strategy that we build from there can only thrive if we have those deep anchor points. And I think one thing that I also really learn from when it comes to orb weaving spiders, and orb weavers through the work that we're all doing in community is that they build from what's there, right? They work within the landscape that they're in. It's not like wishing for other trees or anything, it's like what's here, what's available, and how do we root in and ground in and make the most of that and understand the community wisdom and make the most of that and build that really sticky, stable structure and strategy, off that structure. And so, I think that's really important is that we really want to, like in the work that I do and in the work so many of my clients do too, we start with what's existing, those organizational and communal assets rather than aspirational gaps, and we build strategy from what's actually there. And that what's actually there grows over time when we have a story driven strategy because it gets stronger and stronger and impact grows. And when impact grows, as we all know, funding follows. And so, we start from there and we can, of course, want for more and want for, vision towards the future. But the only way to do that and to build more and to have access to more is to start from where we are. And, one thing about having a web, is that, the orb weaver doesn't know exactly what's going to hit the web, but the infrastructure is built and then attention is paid to what shows up. And I really think of like having story banks in the same way. You build this narrative infrastructure where there's this continuous, gathering of information, and then the stories that you need for moments that you couldn't predict are already there. So you're not having this like scrambling moment of like, oh, we need this for this sudden, grant report, or oh, we've just got invited to this funders lunch and we need some stories to show our impact. Like, what do we do? It's that you have this, that you have a web and a system that's already catching these incredible stories and insights from the work you're doing, and your strategy is built on that. And when anyone knocks at the door, you're going to be ready because you have the assets you need to teach about the work through the voice of the people impacted by it and share that impact and raise awareness for the incredible work you're doing. And then, I talked a little bit about this, but maintenance is the work. So that daily rebuilding, we don't want to have the one and done storytelling. I always say that's where we get into the extraction and away from really beautiful ecosystems of storytelling. And so we want to think of narrative as infrastructure that requires tending, and that tending is beautiful because we learn so much in it and it strengthens our work, and none of it is wasted effort. It's just lessons and learning, and that's so important. And the, offering I mentioned at the top of the episode, those story hours, the like office hours, focused on story driven strategy and storytelling, is really that tending, right? If you sign up, there's the monthly, twice a month calls and the in between support to really make sure that you're tending to and maintaining the important work you're doing. And this goes, beyond story driven strategy to all the work we're doing to maintain that, trust with the community is maintenance, and it's beautiful to be in the maintenance. Like it sometimes seems like the mundane or the in between, but it really is such an important part of our work, and it is the bulk of what we end up doing in many ways. And another thing we can learn from orb weavers, right, is that, things happen thread by thread. So none of us look at the finished orb web and think about, the first thread, but without it, there's nothing. And when we think about those anchoring points, that deep listening and the structure from them, we need to remember that we're building things thread by thread. And if we look too far into what's not built yet, we miss the opportunity to continue that bit by bit and like create something that's incredibly strong and incredibly durable, and incredibly beautiful, bit by bit, step by step, thread by thread, and through that really important point made earlier of like we're building it through recycled energy and recycled materials so that, none of the learnings from past experiences and loss, and we continue to implement them into what we're building and don't get lost in, it's not starting over. It's that sort of thread by thread from what we've learned before, each time getting stronger, each time building a more beautiful, more sustainable, stronger web. And so, yeah, I think again, so often our orb weavers and other species of spiders get really, they can give us the heebie-jeebies. But if we think of them as this grounded wisdom carrier, this grounded and like really strong and beautiful weaver, and it goes without saying too that so much of the work we're doing in community is that weaving itself, right? Of braiding things together, making connections that weren't before there, creating infrastructure to cross from one space to the other. All of this can be learned and is modeled by orb weavers. So I leave you with a few questions to think about, what web are you building? And are you building it thread by thread from those real anchor points, or are we trying to skip into like the beautiful part, right? The pretty spiral part. And I wonder then, what would it look like to treat your organization stories as that infrastructure, as those anchor points? And so I'll be back in the next episode to talk about actually a trio of species that work all really beautifully together and talk a bit about what that's like in terms of ecosystem. And so thank you so much for your time today. And next time you see an orb weaver, you can think about all of this. And I would also love to hear, if there are other species that are coming to mind for you as we move through this series and what they're teaching you and what you're learning from them. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your week. And I hope that you are just finding moments of ease amidst it all and really look forward to reconnecting soon. And please reach out if you'd like to get into our story hours. And as I mentioned, there's a few spots open in April and also in May for Story Lab sessions. So that's that really generative strategy session where we can really, look at the assets that you have and what's possible and how we can move you closer to having that really sustainable ecosystem of story and strategy and impact that you are working so tirelessly for every day. So thank you so much. Take good care, and we'll be back together soon.